Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends.
Я снова рад приветствовать.
Gives me great pleasure to once again welcome all participants and guests of the VTB Capital Investment Forum. Russia Calling has become a tradition for representatives of business circles from all over the world to gather at this forum. So do leaders of major investment funds, captains of industries. Most of you have long experience working in Russia. You all understand full well opportunities and long-term prospects of working in our country. We appreciate greatly your desire to engage in open, meaningful dialogue, constructive cooperation, not dependent on the current political and economic situation. As you all know, the forum was convinced for the first time in 2009, the aftermath of the global economic crisis, where we all felt the aftershocks. But that did not stop us from making plans for the future. Many of these plans have been implemented successfully, turned into specific business projects. It was possible because we trust one another, because we cooperate as partners, and I would like to highlight specifically that many big investors and long-standing economic partners of our country continue increasing their investment in different sectors of Russian economy. Ladies and gentlemen, we adhere to the WTO principles. Unlike some of the founders of the organization, that said, we will make every effort to make Russia develop as an open market-oriented economy. This is our strategic policy line we adhere to. We will consistently deal with emerging issues, foreign restrictions that are harmful not only for Russia but for the entire global economy, make our desires stronger to achieve results, priority areas of development of our country, growing economy, modernization of industry and infrastructure, creating modern jobs, and raising living standards of citizens. Yes, it has become more difficult, but this, like I said, is an incentive for us to focus our resources and pick and choose best solutions, work faster, more efficiently in all fields. Our action, just as before, will be based on balanced, responsible macroeconomic policy, fiscal policy. The events of the past 12 months have once again demonstrated that years back we made the right choice. Despite difficult situation in the global arena, as of end August last year, the surplus of our budget is over 900 billion, which is 2% of GDP, which is 2 times higher than last year, the same period of last year. That said, we adhere to the budgetary rule, which means that part of oil and gas revenues are channeled to the reserve funds. The volume exceeded 9% of the GDP of Russia. As regards inflation, as of end last year, it amounted to about 7.68%, which is a little higher than last year in 2013. Inflation was at 6.5%. The reason is well known. It can be explained by the rise in prices for certain foodstuffs. By the way, you all understand that full well. That is an additional incentive for us to develop domestic agriculture. Monetary inflation does not exceed the forecasted 5%. The federal budget 2015, the budget for 2016-17, that the government submitted to the Duma, provides for a limited deficit. It stands at about 0.5–0.6% of GDP, with the estimated oil price at $96 per barrel. These are sustainable baseline indicators that allow to honor all budgetary obligations, including social obligations. I would like to highlight specifically that despite difficulties, we decided not to increase fiscal burden for the business community. There was a lot of debate going on the matter in the government, but we decided not to raise taxes, and we're not planning to introduce any foreign currency or capital movement restrictions. I hope that has been mentioned today already. Indeed, today we are witnessing strong fluctuations on the foreign currency market. We've had many comments, different comments. But what matters most, and let me stress, that fundamentals are very strong and they guarantee stability. So we're talking about zero deficit budget, good reserves, strong balance of payments. The current account balance is even better than we expected. The Bank of Russia has sufficient toolkit to achieve financial sustainability. And the fact that the Bank of Russia adopted floating exchange rates, that does not mean that it has abandoned the practice of currency interventions. You've seen examples in the recent past. We also believe it is important to secure oneself against possible risks in the most sensitive sectors, and we will be growing the margin of safety in the financial sector. Today, we have put in place certain mechanisms that allow to do transactions in Russia using plastic cards issued by major payment systems, even in case Russian banks are banned from these systems. In 2015, national payment card system will be put in place. Its infrastructure will be independent from international systems. It will have a single operation center and its own payment instruments. It will help to guarantee safety and confidentiality of settlements of our citizens. We'll continue expanding and diversifying foreign economic ties among our priorities, broadening of business, commercial, investment, technological partnership with Latin American countries, Asia-Pacific region countries, our BRICS colleagues, including China and India, naturally. During my May visit to Beijing, as you know, we signed a large package of economic agreements, the total volume amounting to billions of dollars. One of them is a 30-year contract for the supply of Russian gas to China. Creating infrastructure for its implementation will be one of the largest infrastructure projects in the world. But we're not limiting ourselves to oil and gas. We'll work in different fields as well. Just recently, Gazprom Neft, for the first time, supplied oil to China, and the settlement was made in Russian rubles. In the future, we're planning to actively use national currencies for settlements, for energy contracts, not just with China, but with other countries as well. As you know, we have put in place similar mechanisms within BRICS. We believe that using national currencies and settlements will reduce risks and open new opportunities for economic agents and open broad prospects to encourage regional integration processes. Let me remind you that as of January 1st, 2015, an agreement on Eurasian Union will be entering into force. We're witnessing the emergence of 170 million markets, offering free flow of goods, capitals, and services. That project will be very profitable for domestic companies and foreign investors alike. Russia is a member of WTO, unlike Belarus, Kazakhstan, but the principles on which we're building the Eurasian Union are fully in line with all the WTO norms and principles. So I'm confident that it will be easier for our foreign partners to work on this joint single market. Armenia is finalizing its accession process. We're in active dialogue with Kyrgyzstan, and I'm confident that the number of participants of this integration union will be growing in the future. That said, we would like the Eurasian Economic Union to establish close ties with other integration structures, both in Europe and in Asia. Such cooperation would make the entire global economy more sustainable. This dialogue is all the more important with the European Union. That is our leading trading partner. Ladies and gentlemen, alongside with the development of the foreign trade, promoting export, participation in integration processes, we're determined to fully use one of the competitive advantages that Russia has, high-volume domestic market. It ranks 6th in the world. Our goal is to make a breakthrough in the development of industry in the years to come, to create strong domestic companies in the manufacturing industries that would be capable of producing competitive products. Many Russian regions are showing very good results in terms of development of manufacturing industry. Today, already, in some regions of Russia, the growth rate of industrial production exceeds 10%. If we look at the January to August 2014 period, more and more Russian regions offer interesting and profitable investment projects. This growth in Kursk, Voronezh amounted to 11%, in two main Vladimir regions, Perm 12%, in Mordovia, Tolsk 16%, in Orenburg 16.6%. We see great future for Russian agriculture and production of foodstuffs. I'm sure that Russia will continue strengthening its status as one of the global leaders of grain exports, all the more that the forecast for the yield of grains this year is very high. I hope that Russian businessmen will expand agricultural production in these sectors where we're still dependent on imports and become stronger internationally. We'll start supplying agricultural goods with high added value. Let me specifically mention machine building, machine tool building, and instrument engineering. The current situation offers strong incentives to step up R&D in all fields where we are too reliant on foreign partners in terms of technology import. We're talking about critically important import technologies in the first place. Industrial projects and agricultural projects will be given access to low interest rate loans through project finance instruments. Many of you will be asking the question, where are these low interest rates? Where's the long money? We are constantly thinking of new opportunities, and we will be introducing new tools. Such project finance instruments can be used for financing of long-term projects. All we need to think of are modalities of how to make it efficient. We will be launching in 2015 the Industry Development Fund in order to modernize economy and infrastructure. We will be using both national financial resources and sources and more actively cooperate with investment funds and banks from abroad. Financial structures still have confidence in Russia. We can see that on the example of the Russian Foreign Direct Investment Fund that have drawn over $15 billion through its investment platforms. Our budget for the forthcoming 3 years allocates funds for additional capitalization of the fund. That will happen in 2016-2017. The capitalization will be raised to the forecasted level that would allow to expand the portfolio of projects. In the forthcoming period, the resources of Nashekonombank will also grow. Starting this year, its authorized capital will receive at least 30 billion rubles. We have allocated resources for that matter. And in order to preserve the scale of its participation in the national economy, it will be provided with the necessary liquidity. The state is prepared to support the sectors and specific companies that are subject to sanctions. We'll consider options to support them and increase the level of capital. I'm referring to financial institutions in the first place. We will be systemically improving the business climate in Russia. Together with the business community, we already made serious amendments to the federal and regional legislation, lifted a number of barriers, streamlined administrative procedures. We're seeing progress, and leading international institutions confirm that. But what matters, once again, is not how well you do in rating. What matters most is whether it is comfortable for investors to work in every specific region of Russia. And I hope that during the fall and spring session, the State Duma will adopt the remaining package of documents to improve the business climate of Russia, and I would like to use the occasion to address the deputies of the parliament and ask them to swiftly and constructively consider all of these bills, about 100 of them are still in process, so it's a lot of work ahead. So we're trying to make our monitoring and oversight agencies more transparent, more open. Lots remains to be done, but a lot has been done already. So we're finalizing a website where the business community will be able to receive full information about all sorts of inspections and checks that are being performed. So any businessman will be able to get full information about which body started an investigation and at what stage it is. We work with business as true partners. Not a single decision that will have impact on the business environment is taken without broad engagement of the business community. And businessmen themselves do practical oversight of every project, of any change that is made, and report to the administration. On the basis of the questionnaires we send out to the businessmen, we create the national ranking of the investment climate in regions that allows to single out and roll out most efficient practices that improve business climate in regions. The competition of regions will become strong investment for them to fight for investors and create favorable conditions for them. That means that new points of growth will emerge in Russia and the development will be more dynamic throughout Russia. We are moving towards the goals we formulated. We're trying to build a strong, prosperous, open country. For the benefit of the world, we invite you to participate in this mutually beneficial cooperation. Welcome you to Russia. Thank you for your attention. Vladimir Vladimirovich, you answered in your opening statement many questions that were asked today and yesterday in this room. Some had to do with the zero deficit budget, about taxes, long money. You mentioned that Russian authorities have no plans to introduce foreign currency restrictions or capital movement restrictions. All of that was on the mind of the audience over the past 2 days, but I'm certain they have more questions. Do you want to comment now, or do you want to take questions from the floor? Who are the speakers this morning? We heard from Ulukayev, Siluanov, Nabiulina, and Graf. Well, I wouldn't know what to add. You know very well all of these people. These are people that are in charge of formulating and implementing the economic policy. Well, they argue and table their proposals, but you're the one who decides, Mr. President. All I do is smile to show that, the devil is not as frightening as one may try to picture him, or, look serious and show that they will not go through. But, well, let's try and work. Any more questions after this? Let me start by thanking our colleagues, Russian colleagues that were constantly in touch, foreigners that came to take part in this work. I'd like to thank all the panelists and wish them success in implementation of all of their ambitious plans. We should not be too focused on restrictions, although restrictions are on everybody's mind. I mentioned briefly sanctions in my opening statement. It is just silly nonsense that some governments introduce restrictions for their own businesses, make them less competitive, create barriers for their work and open niches on a very promising market, Russian market. And their competitors are making advantage of that. Well, I'm not very much alarmed or concerned. I'm saddened to see a violation of WTO market economy principles, basic principles of competition, that the confidence in leading financial institutions is undermined, or confidence is undermined in leading reserve currencies, dollars and euros. That, in the long run, will damage the entire global economy, and repercussions are yet to be seen. I'm hopeful that we will go through this period of misunderstandings and return to the sustainable trend of development for the global economy. Russia will stand ready to contribute to the joint efforts. And now I'm ready to take your questions if you have any. Don't forget to introduce yourselves. Thank you. My name is Christopher Grandel, member of the board of an investment company from Sweden, Russia. I'm honored to ask the first question. The investment portfolio in our company is mostly in energy. The initial investment of the initial market capitalization is $1 billion. So my question is, what would be the best way to make this investment breakthrough and introduce innovative technologies such as Pirelli winter tires? And this breakthrough is needed now that the geopolitical situation is changing. Vladimir Vladimirovich mentioned the need for change, for breakthrough in his statement. The goal has been formulated before in your decrees of 2012 to raise investment to GDP ratio to 27% of GDP. In the current situation, this goal is no longer ambitious, it is modest. So my question, this investment breakthrough, is it supposed to happen through the efforts of domestic companies, through the publicly owned companies, raising efficiency and effectiveness, or should it be based on privately owned companies? That would be more efficient. The government has a plan to privatize regional electric grid companies. That could be a good step forward. Thank you for this very specific question, very professional question, and a timely one. I don't want to say anything new, but I want to reaffirm that we remain committed, like we've done in the past, to attracting foreign private direct investment. Private direct investment, let me stress, but that will only happen when there's favorable environment, and that would require public investment in infrastructure development inter alia. It is clear to all that unless infrastructure develops, investment would be difficult, especially for private investors in certain sectors of economy. Difficult, borderline impossible, because investment would be too costly and not efficient. So the role of the state would be to invest in infrastructure. Your field of work is extremely profitable. We remember our commitments to investors, not just your company, but other companies from Scandinavia, Central Western Europe that invested in Russian energy. We remember that we committed to liberalize power market. I'm sure you participated in all the debate, and you know that we have to be very cautious and keep in mind what happened in 2008, 2009. Be very cautious not to damage our consumers. But this is the direction in which we're moving, and we will be privatizing the grid you mentioned. Christopher, if I'm not mistaken, used to be stationed in Moscow as British diplomat, and then he decided to quit, and he stayed in Moscow. Well, you can't be a spy all of your life, you know. You have to change hats sometimes. And I'm sure he's better off now, too. A man I respect greatly once said, he's a very smart man. I met him in St. Petersburg back in the days, early 90s. I was meeting him in the airport, and he asked me about my professional background, and I started listing, without mentioning, a specific agency for which I used to work. And so I would give him name after name and say, what about before that, and before that, and before that? I said, well, intelligence, Soviet intelligence. So he looked me in the eyes and said, all the decent men started their career in intelligence, and so did I. Number 2. Second question, please.
Thank you very much. My name is David Sekiguchi from QFR Capital, a fund based in New York, and thank you very much to VTB for this wonderful conference. My question is, in the last 3 years, growth has been significantly slower than when the government set the objectives for the period 2012-2018. So I would like to know, how do you think about whether these objectives are still attainable? And if not, what type of growth projections do you use when you make strategic decisions? Thank you very much.
Well, we will not be changing our goals. Life makes changes. It's the course of life. We just spoke about certain benchmarks that were formulated in mid-2012. Back then, we said this was the right thing to say, that the goals will only be attained provided the Russian economy grows at a certain rate. But we're seeing that, unfortunately, growth rate is slower than we anticipated. Does it mean that we have to rethink the strategic goals? No, but let us remember that 15 years back we said that we need to double GDP over the 10 years' time. That seemed completely impossible back then. Many laughed at us, saying that this is just nonsense and impossible. But we did do that. The trend is different, not just in Russian economy, but in global economy. Our moderator said that panelists, our ministers and central bank governors must have spoken about the cyclical nature of economy, about systemic restrictions. I hear the same story told week after week, but no one knows for certain, no one knows for facts. I don't know if they mentioned, but the big question is what the oil price will be. The estimate in our budget is $96, but who knows what happens? Look at the risks in global energy, political risks, what's happening in the Middle East. No one knows, no one can predict. So the goals are unchanged. What we need to do is find a toolkit that would allow to attain the goals, or at least get close to attaining them, just using different toolkit. And the tools are well known to all: improving business climate, attracting private investment, domestic and foreign alike, and creating conducive environment, modernization of economy. Mr. Shohin knows well. He keeps formulating these goals for the government. Are we doing good? Well, at times better, at times we have issues, but we are moving in the right direction. We'll continue doing so. I'm confident that we will achieve most of the goals. We'll continue privatization of publicly owned assets. Look, in 2015, 16, 17, we have a list of assets that will be privatized. Of course, we'll look at market situation in individual sectors before a final decision is taken, but we will continue doing so. You mentioned decrees, 2012 decrees, that contain a set of goals and benchmarks. I said that the situation's changed. It did indeed. If you remember the articles I published before the election and the decrees I issued, that we will be privatizing publicly owned assets, but energy companies stand aside. Like I said back then, the situation is changing now, so I'm not confident we should do that immediately. We are considering bringing to the market large packages of shares of publicly owned energy companies. But we'll find the right solutions and we will move forward. Sector 4, please.
Thank you. My name is Rohit Chopra. I represent Lazard Asset Management in New York. We're a large foreign institutional investor in Russia and have been for more than a decade. My question is related to President Putin about your view of the central bank. We're in a difficult environment. Growth has slowed, but unfortunately inflation is still stubbornly high. When you look at the comments out of the central bank, they recognize the importance of bringing down inflation and have targeted historic levels in terms of future levels of inflation. In your opinion, during this time, should this be a primary focus of the central bank? Thank you.
Well, the focus of any central bank, including the Russian central bank, is supporting the sustainability of national currency, and you can't do that without lowering the inflation. And I mentioned in my speech that in the previous decades we were following strict macroeconomic principles. Of course, we're always basing ourselves on the current situation and will continue to do this, but we will be focused on not violating the principles. I don't know whether colleagues told you or not, but I have mentioned in my speech that, for example, we are maintaining the so-called fiscal rules or budget rules. With all the desire of our industrial colleagues, we are not raising our public expenses. As far as a little increase in inflation is concerned, I believe that the overwhelming majority in this hall understand that it's due to the food basket and to our actions on limiting some food imports from a number of our partner states as a reciprocal measure for their sanctions against the Russian economy. Of course, there are disadvantages in that, but I'm sure and confident that it's a temporary measure. And of course, it would be a great impetus, not political, but also economic, to invest in the agricultural sector. Our Chinese colleague has mentioned this as one of the directions for investments, the agriculture of Russia. Why? Because the profit is good. And of course, this would be great impetus for developing Russian agricultural sector. We've had huge progress for the last several years. The last year's growth of the agricultural sector of the Russian Federation was 6.2%. We have reduced our dependence on the import of pork, poultry. Of course, we have huge dependence already. That's 28% in beef, but these are all future growth potential for the Russian agricultural sector. Of course, our anti-monopoly service should have constant monitoring of the speculative tendencies in the market. That goes without saying, but that is a temporary thing, I'm sure. As far as the policy of the central bank is concerned, if I finished answering your question, I believe it is balanced, and you know, the central bank is not remaining within some dogmas or old thinking. If it needs to do interventions, it does it. So it has a flexible posture. Thank you. Even the bankers do not blame central bank for anything. No, everyone blames it. The central bank and the Ministry of Finance are always to blame, because people say they have the high rates, etc. The first sector, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Reynal from the United States. Mr. Putin, you mentioned sanctions earlier, and one of the impacts of those sanctions is on the cost of capital in Russia. It's gone up by 1 or 2% is a good estimate. That means that it's more difficult for corporations to access global capital. Do you think the government should help? One of the solutions is to broaden and deepen the local market, to create a bond market which is more liquid, with more depth, maybe with a longer yield curve. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Putin? Many thanks.
Well, we can see that you're from the US, because, you know, you follow the way of making the fiscal policy softer, which your government is doing. I believe it is correct, because the US, as all of us know, is producing the main product of the dollar. But we do not produce dollars. That is why we have to be very careful and cautious. As far as the bonds market and shares market is concerned, we are issuing them. The Minister of Finance is issuing them, but we should follow what's happening in the market, because, of course, the financial sector would be glad to buy the government bonds, but that means we will take some market activity out of it, and that's how we put under threat the real economy of Russia. Of course, we'll use such tools and instruments, because currently this bond market is at a record low level, but we'll be very cautious about that. So I believe the growth should be ensured not due to liquidity or some financial tools, but through structural change in the economy of the Russian Federation. Thank you. Sector 5, please. You are welcome. I'm Cedric Ettinger, I'm French, and if you allow, I'll speak French. What's your surname? Cedric Ettinger. I'm an elected representative of the French people living in Russia, and also a member of the board of directors of a little bank here. I'd like to say that we have been speaking about macroeconomy for the 2 days, but we have microeconomy as well, and our bank covers everything which is linked with the lifestyle of small towns and villages in different regions of Russia. And here we see little support, little understanding, our little desire. For example, we are now implementing a project which would help a town to reduce costs on power for their light bulbs, and our little bank will help, because other banks just refused to finance this project because it's not so glamorous as some oil and gas projects. But this particular project would increase the life level of people, because the tax burden then will be reduced. The next stage is agricultural, and there we have small manufacturers, and from the 8th of August we have helped a lot to the importers from France to bring in their goods, etc. But since the 8th of August, we'll have to find the Russian manufacturers and Russian goods and help them, because there is an anecdote. I believe I've been to the Altai region, and they actually always claim that they have not enough fertilizers. But what was your question? Sorry. Well, how would you help all those microeconomic sector, which is creating a lot of jobs now, and how would you fill all the stacks in the shops? How would we do that? Well, I do not understand what the actual problem is. Maybe it's linked to financement. The VTB have a lot of money. They'll help you, I believe, because they do not know where to put their money. Everyone cries that there's a lack of money in the project, but there's also a lack of good projects to invest. Well, as far as small and medium projects are concerned, of course, we are in huge debt before this sector of the Russian economy. We have the necessary tools and instruments, but unfortunately, they do not have full-scale public financing, and all those funds which are envisaged to support these SMEs must be expanded and extended. And we'll work on creating future mechanisms, including the mechanisms for dotations. Of course, the regions and the regional authorities must work more actively on that as well. And of course, there are some problems and barriers. There are some regions which are very advanced in this matter, and I mentioned that. But of course, there are also regions which need to do a lot in order to solve this problem. That is why, which I have mentioned today, we are building a system of efficiency evaluation with the business, which would help us to evaluate the efficiency of our local team work. And as far as small business is concerned, I believe we have something else to do there, which we haven't done. Of course, microfinancing system must be deployed and developed, which is done in a lot of countries in the world, and which was actually invented by, I believe, one of our Indian colleagues. And this sector is actually developing in many areas. There are Nobel Prizes awarded for that. Of course, this is our gap. We have huge reserves for developing our economy. As far as your project, I'll ask our moderator to communicate with you. Well, I'll promise you that we'll give money for biofertilizers in the Altai region. But that is a promising direction. Okay. Sector 2.
My name is I work for UBS and I'm based in Germany. Mr. President, thank you for taking my question. This year there was a very significant effort from Russia to increase economic interaction with Asia and also with Latin America. Is this a long-term strategic objective to increase economic interaction with those regions away from Europe and the US, or is it only a temporary phenomenon based on the current restrictions? Thank you very much.
Well, you are a representative of a global company, and you and we all sitting here know how quickly Asia is developing today. Our colleagues from India, from China were speaking here, and I'm sure that when the representative of the Chinese investment fund spoke about the capacity and the possibilities of the investment funds of China, it actually was shocking, amazing for everyone, because these are real figures, they are not invented, and this makes us think on how we should answer the question asked by our China, how we should benefit from the growth of China in our economies. I mean, all the countries of all us present here, and Russia is thinking about that, but it's thinking not in terms of the yesterday's sanctions or political limitations. We have been long talking about that. Why has the SCO been created? Why the BRICS was created? It began in 2005 when there was a G8 in St. Petersburg, And we agreed with our Chinese and Indian colleagues to meet on a trilateral meeting. That was the beginning of BRICS. And at the last meeting, together with together with South Africa and Brazil, we agreed to create the single joint pool of currency reserves, a joint BRICS bank, etc. We are considering the transactions in national currencies. We are considering large cooperation projects. This is our reasonable and meaningful choice, which was made years ago. I mean, about the trends of development of global economy. But taking into account the sanctions which we mentioned, of course, they just speed up this work. They serve as a catalyst. But there's nothing extraordinary in this. And we are not going to stop our relationships with our traditional partners with Europe. We have a large turnover, 430 billion with them. But we should look into the future as well. Thank you very much. Sector 4, please.
Hello, Eric J. I'm from New York. I'm with an investment fund that invests in bonds and shares. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come speak with us today. Wanted to talk about Ukraine. If you look at the various outcomes, what is the outcome that would be most ideal or most aligned with Russia's national interest? And is that outcome achievable? And what is Russia going to do to achieve that outcome? Thank you.
The national interest of Russia would be contributed by Ukraine's solving the economic and political crisis, going out of it, because now it is in a deep economic crisis, so we need recovery of the social and political sphere. We are interested in having a predictable, reliable partner and neighbor. Ukraine is not a foreign country for us, an alien country. I have mentioned it in many cases, and I'd like to highlight, despite all the tragedy that is currently in place, the Ukrainian people are a close and very close people to us. We are linked with religious, cultural, historic ties, and I believe that basing on these fundamentals of our cooperation, we will develop our relations in future, and we'll do everything in order to achieve this as soon as possible. I hope that the elections, the parliamentary elections in Ukraine would be good, and there would be political stabilization, which we have all waited for a long time. But I can't but say that we're basing on the idea that all the people living in every corner of Ukraine should have all the rights enshrined in the international law and in the Ukrainian legislation, and that we hope that no one would be discriminated in their language, religion and ethnicity. That is how you could maintain the territorial integrity of a country and recover the unity of the country. And that is how you could develop the economy and the social sphere. We hope this will happen and will contribute to that. You're welcome. Back there, the colleague who's holding his hand up. Yeah. Thank you for noticing me, Mr. Putin. Because you have to do almost everything. Just jump out of your trousers. No, don't do that. Well, but of course, there's a record number of investors here. Well, I believe you just want to be complacent, yeah? But I'd like to ask a question, a serious question. I'm Alexander Branes, Perspective Capital, a large investor in Russia. My question is dedicated to the Bashneft case. because it's based on a statement that the property was privatized illegally and it should be given back to the state. You, in your speeches, have mentioned that privatization was unfair with big problems. There has been also mentioned that oligarchs are no good, and we can't but agree with you. Still, what do you think, in the interest of developing the economy, is that really necessary to look in the distant past and take out some episodes? One of them happened more than a decade ago, the other one more than 20 years ago. And should you put under doubt the property rights? Because if you should, then you could take the assets from any proprietor, not only the one who privatized the thing, but of the one who later bought these assets. You have mentioned in your articles before the election and in your statements that there was a phrase in one of your articles in 2012 where you wrote that there are a lot of sayings in society that the privatization was unfair, and you agree with that, but then you write that if you take away the property now, it would just stop the economy and grow the unemployment.
Well, it is a very relevant question. Once again, like I said, we will not be reconsidering on a scale the results of privatization. But there's a difference between each and every specific case. So if a law enforcement has questions regarding a certain deal, there has to be an investigation. We cannot stand in the way, so an investigation and then a decision. But I hope these will not be criminal cases, but the civil cases. But I will not interfere. I will not give any instructions. That does not mean that the state is reconsidering the results of privatization. None of that will happen, I can assure you. A lady in the back, in the middle, rather. Do you mind standing up?
Здравствуйте, Кристина Варес, Данский Капитал. Меня и моих коллег интересует вопрос, на какой стадии имплементации являются две государственные программы, претворение в жизнь которых может существенно улучшить инвестиционную привлекательность российских компаний.
Will make Russian companies much more appealing in terms of investment. The first program is being drafted by the Ministry of Economy, improving corporate governance. And the second program is being drafted by the Analytical Center of the government to raise productivity. We get little information about the implementation. We only hear there are some delays. Do you think they are of strategic importance? And where are we in terms of implementation stage? Well, Minister Ulikayev was in this room. You should have asked him. I would ask him the question. I would like to ask him this question because these programs are important in my view. They will be finalized, I'm confident. It's important that they are efficient, operational, and implementable. Like I said, we are looking into new tools that would help improve the investment climate, reduce red tape in the economy, create conducive environment for startups. We're creating technological platforms, encouraging and inciting regions that are helping startups. We're sponsoring from federal budget infrastructure development. We're subsidizing interest rates for certain projects. I don't know if my colleagues mentioned that before me, but we do a lot in terms of project finance. Very briefly, let me touch upon that. What it means is that when a project, and by the way, please keep that in mind, and please start using these new opportunities. So a new project has to be approved by the Ministry of Economy and other ministries and agencies. And once government agencies are confident that this is efficient and highly profitable, potentially profitable project, it will be entitled to funding from VTB or other institution at the central bank rate plus 1%. So we're talking about a very good instrument, but the business community is not informed. They're unaware of this instrument. They don't know what it takes to use it. While in my view, this project finance is a good instrument, but we will continue. We will finalize the programs you referred to. Final question, if you don't mind.
Hello, Mr. President. Thank you, panel. My name is Matthias Pino from Golden Tree Asset Management, based in the US. My question has been commented on briefly before, but I wanted to go into it in more depth. The question is, does the planned privatization and eventual sale by the state of all its assets, except for the infrastructure monopolies and enterprises in the military-industrial complex, remain part of your administration's strategy, or have the events this year altered those plans in any way? Thank you.
Well, we have altered these plans to a certain extent. Like I said, the change is that we are considering selling certain assets from major energy companies where we hold the control package at the moment. We're not planning to withdraw from capital of these companies completely, not at the moment, but we will be selling certain parts of the companies. I don't know if the government's discussed it already or not, but if not, they will debate the matter in the near future. So we're considering options. These will happen maybe this year already. As regards military technical assets, same. We are considering possibility for doing IPOs for some, not all, some of the enterprises, some shares might be placed on the market. In case we see it will stimulate their development, we will be investing a lot, 3 trillion rubles in the nearest future, in the military technical industry. So we're not making any cuts. This is money allocated for the next few years. We have to postpone our plans just because the industry isn't ready, not that we don't have the money. So we will be investing in the development of our military technical industry. But many of the products they produce are dual-use products. 25% of the total production are civilian products. So to make these enterprises more flexible, productive, efficient, we might do an IPO of some of them. Thank you very much for this extremely interesting, productive meeting, discussion. Thank you for being interested in Russia, and every success to you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.